بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We hope and we pray that everyone is doing well, inshallah ta'ala, after this blessed month, the blessed month of Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our dua should always be after Ramadan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts from us Ramadan and allows us to reach many more Ramadans, Ya Rabbil Alameen. First off, before we begin, inshallah ta'ala, I wanted to encourage everyone, inshallah ta'ala, if they haven't already done so, to begin to fast the 6 days of Shawwal. Of course, it's not obligatory, nor are we implying that, but it is a recommendation, especially since a lot of people are staying at home and whatnot, and since you're already in the habit of fasting, then it is good to continue in those habits, inshallah ta'ala, and to fast more so, inshallah ta'ala, in this month. Remember, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, if you fast the 6 days of Shawwal, after you have fasted the month of Ramadan, it's as if you have fasted the entire year. And of course, this makes sense from the point of view that the month of Ramadan gives us 10 months, because one good deed is multiplied by 10. So 1 month is multiplied by 10, so that's 10 months. And then the 6 days of Shawwal are multiplied by 10, which is 60. That's 60 days. That's another 2 months, which equals the entire year of reward. So imagine if you can get an entire year of fasting of reward just by fasting an additional 6 days, then obviously people would be encouraged to do so. Not only this, but one of the benefits is that it helps expiate some of the mistakes or shortcomings that we have in our obligatory fast, similar to how our sunnah prayers work, which means that when a person prays their sunnah prayers, on the Day of Judgment, there's an explicit hadith that says that if a person has deficiencies in their fard prayer, not just that maybe they missed some prayers, they forgot, etc., but even they have mistakes, shortcomings, some prayers where they didn't have wudu, for example, some prayers where they weren't completely focused, some prayers where they were praying too fast, some prayers where they're doing this, that, etc., then the sunnah prayers are brought in to fill in those gaps and to remedy the mistakes that are in the fard prayer in order for it to be complete. And if it's complete, then the hadith says that all of his other deeds will be okay, they'll be complete as well. And if his salah is deficient, then everything else is deficient, which means that our measurement that we have is, of course, our salah and our ibadah and our worship and our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that said, inshallah ta'ala, I wanted to move on to a very pertinent and timely topic, inshallah ta'ala. Like we said, we only have about 15 minutes during these Friday reminders, just to keep people, inshallah ta'ala, tied to the masjid, and the reminders are good for the believers. It is very sad what we see in the news in terms of another killing of a black man at the hands of the police. And where the person said, "I cannot breathe," and this isn't, unfortunately, the first time that we've heard it, and sadly it might not be the last time that we've heard it, and there are probably many other times that it was said as well, and that it wasn't recorded on video, and this is why we have no idea about it and there's no outcry. The reality is that racism is very live and real, not only in this country, but even in our own communities, even in countries back home. And the reality is that, my brothers and sisters, the cure for racism has to come from within. Meaning the cure for this idea that one race is superior over another it has to start with remedying the heart itself. Because the reality is, and Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik Al-Shabazz, rahimahullah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him, he himself was very explicit. He used to be a black nationalist, which of course was a counter to the idea of white nationalism, which was that whites are superior than blacks. And so obviously one extreme is going to give birth to another extreme, which is that blacks are superior to whites. This is very attractive, especially in that day and age. And it wasn't until Malcolm X himself saw the beauty of Islam, and actually what Islam preaches is that you realize that one extreme cannot be balanced by another extreme. It has to be balanced by actual balance. And this is why Islam brings that balance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this in the Quran. But we have to practice it, and we have to truly believe in it. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nasu, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. This verse that we repeat time and time again. And I'll repeat it again today. It's a verse. It is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, and it's something that we desperately need in this time. We have created you from a male and a female. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. We made you into tribes and nations in order for you to know one another, not for you to feel superior to one another, not for you to even exude a sense of, discrimination or anything else like this. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. Indeed, the most honorable of you in the eyes of Allah are the ones who have most taqwa. This is why Allah's measurement is a superior measurement. But that measurement cannot be measured. It's within the hearts. And my brothers and sisters, we shouldn't get... Obviously, as Muslims, we have to be very judicious as to what we read in the news, what we read about what's going on, etc. Because a lot of times we see, for example, a black person was killed at the hands of a white person. Does that automatically mean it was racist? No, it does not. We have to be fair. Because the thing is, the accusation of racism is knowing what's in the person's heart, meaning I know their intentions. Obviously, I do not know their intentions. But we can definitely look, is there a trend going on? We can look at their other actions. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu was very clear on this, that we do not judge people based upon their intentions because we do not know what those are, but we judge them based upon their deeds. And if I look and that same police officer has killed so many other people of color, which he has, and there are so many other complaints against him that were racist in nature, etc., then I know clearly that this is following a pattern. And the accusation of racism therefore stands. Yes, I do not know what was his intention at the time, for sure, 100%. But if it follows a trend, if I look at his other deeds, etc., then this is how we judge things. We judge them based upon their deeds. So if I look as a country that black men are shot way more than white people are, then I know that there's a trend. There's a problem here that needs to be actually fixed. If I know that people of color are incarcerated at rates so much more higher than people of non-color, then I know that there's also a problem here. It's institutionalized. It's ingrained. There is an inherent problem. And my brothers and sisters, a lot of these problems cannot be fixed by just getting laws, enacted, or it has to actually come from within. Those same people that have those racist tendencies, we have to talk to them. We have to show them the faults of their ways. And unfortunately, unless we get the idea out there, ingrained in them, educate them, show them, etc., then obviously there's still going to be a problem. This is why Malcolm X himself, he said that the problem of racism will not be solved until people change what's in their hearts. And he said very clearly that Islam offers that solution. No other religion offers it. Every religion out there actually has elements of racism except for Islam. In fact, this is one of the ways that Islam shows its superiority over all other religions. Wallahi, it does. This is why time and time again when people come to masajid and they see how diverse they are, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to open up the masajid soon, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and may He lift this plague from among us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And may He cure all those who are sick and have mercy upon all those who have died because of this disease. And may He replace the income and the rizq and allow them to have an abundance of rizq, Ya Rabbil Alameen, for the people who lost their source of rizq during this pandemic. When people come and visit our masajid, they see the strength of Islam in that it does not have any racism. In that when we preach that we believe that our God is one, that our Prophet is one, that our book is one, that the direction of prayer that every single Muslim on the planet faces is one, that we know that our origin is one. We came from Adam and Eve. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to realize this. When we realize that humanity itself is one, then obviously there can be no room for racism. And that's why it's very sad when we know that racism is still very well alive and well in our own communities. Now, it's not overt racism like the ones that we see with these white supremacists and white nationalism and whatnot, but it still exists. And you have Arabs thinking that they're better than people that are non-Arabs, and you have non-Arabs thinking that they're better than Arabs, and you have whites thinking that they're better than black, and they might not overtly express it, and it might even just permeate through like little interactions and whatnot. And by the way, these little subtleties, the subtle racism is still a problem within our community. And the Prophet ﷺ, by the way, he said, there are a few matters. Umur لا تزال في أمتي إلى يوم القيامة. There are going to be some problems that will persist in my ummah until the day of judgment. And he said one of them was التفاخر بالأنساب, where people become proud because of their lineage, because of where they come, their origins. Meaning this sense of pride causes them to look down on others. It's not necessarily overt racism, but it's actually inherent biases that cause them to view themselves and the people from their own country or even their own village as being superior to other people. And this is unfortunately mistaken thinking. That even many major companions, when he called Abu Bakr as-Siddiq ibn as-Sawda, the son of a black woman, of course he is the son of a black woman, his mother is black. But he meant it as a derogatory term because in his mind he's thinking that if your mother is black, that automatically makes you less of an individual. And of course the Prophet ﷺ got so upset at this individual. And he says, إِنَّكَ امْرُؤٌ فِيكَ جَاهِلِيَّةٌ. You are a man who still has pre-Islamic ignorance inside of you. And the man repented. He immediately realized, he's like, I have to change this about me. And the Prophet ﷺ, where he says in this amazing hadith, says, كلكم بنو آدم وآدم خلق من تراب ولينتهين قوم يفخرون بآبائهم أو ليكونن أهون على الله من الجعلان. He says, all of you are from Adam, and Adam is from dirt, and people shall stop showing pride due to their forefathers, or they will be lower in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than dung beetles. Al-Ju'lan are dung beetles. The beetles that literally accumulate the dung and then they proceed to eat it. Now why did the Prophet ﷺ say that they were dung beetles? Because he's, and this is explicit, what does our body turn into after we die? It decays. It turns into basically what the dung beetle is actually collecting, decayed matter. That's what comes out of our bodies. That's what our bodies become. And basically he's saying that you're like the dung beetle. You're just collecting decayed matter when you're proud of your forefathers. Because at the end of the day, our forefathers, that's what they are. We all came from dirt. We all came from nothing. And if we think that we are something because of just, our lineage and whatnot, then this is an unfortunate thing. The Prophet ﷺ says in another hadith, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ دَعَى إِلَىٰ عَصَبِيَّةٍ. He is not from us who calls to asabiyya, a type of tribalism. And unfortunately, we have many different forms and shapes of tribalism. And the thing is, when you study this in depth, you read the psychology behind it. Tribalistic behavior is actually very human because it's survival instincts. Meaning that of course, this is assuming that the worldview that these people are studying from is an evolutionary one. Which means that everything that we have is an evolutionary tactic that's meant to protect us. So the theory goes that at one point human beings saw everything around them as a threat, and so one of the only ways of protecting themselves was to stick to their tribe, stick to their people, because back then people would raid other people, etc. So we're very tribalistic in this because it's a survival tactic. Okay. Let's go along with that thinking. So the thinking goes is that we will rate people based upon what I can immediately judge, not based upon what needs actually more discerning. So what I can immediately judge, skin color, height, language, you know what I mean? Outfits, clothes. If a person is dressed different than me, I immediately, in my primordial brain, my biological brain, I will recognize them as a threat. Of course, all of these have nothing to do with actual threats, especially in this society. And it says the better way to judge people is based upon their thinking, their ideologies. Because their skin color does not equate ideologies. Their skin color does not equate to, okay, what does this person view? Does this person believe in God? Does this person this? Does this person view everybody else as a threat? Is this person racist? Etc. That actually takes a little bit more discerning. Which means that a lot of these modes of tribalism obviously don't work, and I doubt that they ever worked, but that's a different topic altogether. It's very human to have biases because of that inherent tribalism that we have, which means that we do have to work on ourselves. Because the moment that a person says, oh, I'm safe from racism, that's the moment that you know that they still have to work on themselves. Because ultimately these messages get ingrained inside of us. They do. They've actually done studies, and you can look these up inshallah ta'ala, where if a person is exposed to a lot of news stories about, for example, black men committing certain crimes time and time again, but not seeing white men committing an equal amount of crimes, which they do, then automatically this will ingrain inside of the mind an inherent tie, an attachment that, oh, when I see a gas station robbed, automatically I'm going to think that it's a black person. When in fact that's obviously not always the case at all. And the opposite is true, that when I have good stories about black men, the same category of people, just to use it as an example, then I will actually change my opinion as well. And they showed this in the study. They would expose people to young black men that are actually achieving in their careers, that are doing great work for their community, that are leaders, that are stepping up. And when they did these tests, you know what I mean, that measure biases and whatnot, their scores actually went down on the bias scale. This is why in Islam we have stories of great Sahaba who we know were black. Not just Bilal, which is a famous case, but also Usama ibn Zayd. Usama, his mother was Ayman, who herself, she was one of the people who raised the Prophet ﷺ, but she was a black slave woman. And she eventually became freed. And his father was Zayd, who was also the freed slave of the Prophet ﷺ. And so Usama was dark in color. And that racism still existed during his time. To where the Prophet ﷺ, a lady, a Sahabiya, her name is Fatima bint Qais, and she came and she told the Prophet ﷺ, I want to get married. She had been divorced or widowed. I don't remember exactly which one, but she was available for marriage. Which means that she had previously been married. That's the point that I'm trying to make. She had previously been married, and this is why she was taking care of her affair more so than necessarily her wali. Obviously, the wali still has to sign on, but if a woman has been previously married, she has more autonomy in choosing her spouse. This is a separate topic, of course. But she goes to the Prophet ﷺ and she says, 2 men have come to my hand for marriage. Who do you think I should do? And one of them, the Prophet ﷺ says, this guy is stingy. This other person is prone to violence. He's been known to beat people. I don't think either is good for you. And so she said, so who do you think? And he says, I think you should marry Usama. And as soon as she heard this, she said no. At her initial off the bat. Why? Because Usama was black. And she actually says this. And the fact that she says this, she admits it later on, shows the honesty and subhanAllah, the sincerity of many of these companions. And then later on, she says, I realized if the Prophet is recommending it, then obviously it's good for me, even if I have this inherent bias. So she goes back and she says, okay, I'll marry Usama. And she says, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, was marrying that man. Marrying Usama. Usama turned out to be, obviously he's one of the amazing Sahaba that we have. And we've gone over his biography, and maybe inshallah ta'ala we can go over it again. But she was thankful to Allah that she married Usama. So initially she was hesitant, and simply because of his color. And this shows you that something that we need to work on. A person can be a great Muslim but still have these tendencies, and we have to work on them. How many times in our communities have there been people who have been rejected for marriage simply because of their skin color? I've personally have worked on so many cases of this nature, where a lot of times there's nothing that we can do. And sometimes the family will try to paint it as, well, it's not just because of his color, it's because of other things as well. Okay, if that's what you want to say, look, I don't know what's in your heart, I don't know your intentions. But I do know that on the Day of Judgment, that if we prevented something that could have been done good, and because of that injustice happened, then we will be held accountable for it. On the Day of Judgment, you know, our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he says, إِذَا أَتَاكُمْ مَنْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ. If somebody of good character and good deen comes to you, then marry him. Because if you do not do so, then there will be a big fitna in the land and bigger problems. And sometimes people are they're not overtly racist, but they're racist in these subtle ways when it comes to business or marriage, or the way that we even organize our masajid and whatnot. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us. I'm saying this, of course, because I know even myself, I can be guilty of certain subtleties that we have to work on ourselves. Ways that we might express our bias, ways that we might show that we're preferential to one group over another. This is why it's a constant thing. This is why even major Sahaba fell into this. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, he recommended certain things to realize the reality of the situation, to think about who we are, to think about all these other things. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us and guides us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He forgives us for our shortcomings and our sins. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He brings about justice for those that have been killed unjustly. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He cures this illness of racism from our hearts and from the hearts of all Americans, inshaAllah ta'ala, and that He enables us to show them the beauty of Islam and the beauty of how it erodes away at that racism, and that it actually solves it. One of the best things that Islam has to offer is the solution to the problem of racism. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us good ambassadors to our own religion, and that He allows us to actually show the truth as truth and grant us the ability to follow it, and show us falsehood as falsehood and grant us the ability to stay away from it.